My name is Princetta Newman. I come to know Black Wall Street because I lived it. I've lived it since 1956 when I was 11 years old, and my mom drugged me here kicking and screaming because I lived in Chicago, and I thought Oklahoma was where the Indians were and the teepees, and they didn't have running water. So that's how but my experiences have been through my family mostly. I have my father, my stepfather, and my aunt were part of the Black Wall Street genre. They had businesses on Greenwood since 1917. And so I know I got to meet people because I associated with them. So a lot of the people that people are putting up as icons for the generation, I'm like, well, I knew him. Well, I used to serve him breakfast when I worked at a restaurant down on Greenwood. Greenwood is the name of the street. People come to Tulsa looking for Black Wall Street, and there technically is no such thing. The street's name is Greenwood. They have now put a sign up there to say Black Wall Street, but it's because Booker T. Washington named it in 1913 when he came here to dedicate the high school. And so I've become known as the historian. I have over 1,500 pictures of the area and the people of the area that a lot of people don't have. I came into a family through my stepfather of involved and active people in North Tulsa. We were active in the social life, in the religious life, in the economic life, and so I've lived it. It was not anything I had to go out and look and seek, and people come to me to find out if I've got a picture of this, that, and the other. I've got 3 people on my list today that I've got to find some pictures for, their grandparents and all that. So people bring things to me, and I was a child, and I worked with people. You know how you do kids, you use them. And they used me to go get this and go get that, and so I got to know a lot of people of helping do bridge parties and doing anything that was going on in the community. I was involved in the YWCA, and that was a big thing back in my childhood. So people know me, and they know my family, and I have one last name that is not legally my last name, which is Cloman, but they know me as Little Cloman. So I've just become a magnet for people. I had a print shop as an adult. I had a print shop, and in that shop I printed funeral programs. So I learned other stories through that association, as well as got pictures of people who were deceased, and I did a program for them. So I have a collection of those kinds of pictures that nobody else has. The location is important because coloreds or blacks or whatever we're called, Negroes, that all those names, are not allowed in 1906 to travel into the train station. Now, if you notice, Archer is basically a block and a half from the railroad tracks. People were not allowed to go into the train station. They had to get off the train before it went into the station. So it stopped at Archer and Greenwood to let people off. Well, that's where he built his store. O.W. Gurley built his store. And that gave it a commerce interest, because people needed to, remember, no days of no air conditioning. They gave it hot food or cold soda water, one of the two. They had to have somewhere to go to the bathroom. They just had to have services. That's why he built his store there. Now, in building that store there, other people came to recognize that that was going to be a hot point. And they built their stores there. And they built another store there. And they built another service there. So it developed. That's how it became Black Wall Street. Booker T. Washington came here in 1913 to dedicate the new high school, a one-room, what we would call today prefab. And he was, when people come to see you in town, you show them off the things you're proud of. And so people showed off Greenwood. And he said, you have a Negro Wall Street, comparing it to Wall Street in New York, the center of commerce. That's where the name came from. In the 50s, we became black, and so they changed it to Black Wall Street. Okay, as a tour guide, and by the way, I have a touring company, you would get off the train at Archer and Greenwood, a little bit past there, and you'd walk this block and a half, and the first thing you get to is Gurley's store. And he has in that store things from lace to shovels, just everything for living. So he's going to provide your personal needs. Next door to him, he's built a little hotel. You got to have some place to sleep and stay. Now, understand, we could not eat, sleep, play, or anything on the other side of that railroad track. Nothing. So everything we could work on the other side of it, but we had to come back into that area to do anything else we wanted to do. And that's, I know you've heard the story about the circulation of the dollar. The people who worked outside of the community had to bring their money back into the community to spend, because they couldn't buy a Coca-Cola or anything. Then you'd have a hotel, a place they could stay. Another man came to town, J.B. Stratford, an attorney. He saw the possibilities, and he really invested and started making services. He built a beautiful hotel. He had a chandelier that was worth more than $5,000 that he hung in his hotel. Now you can imagine a $5,000 chandelier, what it looked like at that time. It was from Switzerland, of course. But and next door to that was another rooming house somebody built, and then there was a restaurant, and then, as you said, all kinds of services, getting your hair cut. Everything you had to spend in that community. Well, that created millionaires from people just offering services. They did barbecue places, and see, soul food was not a word then, but that kind of food, home cooking it was called. You had to buy your clothes, you had to buy your food, you had to buy your cleaning supplies, you had to buy everything from in that community. So a dollar turned over as much as, there are all kinds of numbers from 11 to 30 as how many times a dollar turned over in that community before it got back out of it. So you could have your clothes cleaned, cleaners, and French cleaners, of course. And I had to look up to see what a French cleaner was. But they did the starching shirts. You're too young to know anything about that. But yeah, right. If we're much more casual today than that. But everything you had to have, from hairpins to, well, we didn't have wigs, but we had hair pieces back then. But anything you wanted was in that community. And that's hard for a young day millennium to understand, that you had 3 blocks where you could buy anything you wanted. There was a church house, there was a whorehouse, there was a club, then there was another grocery store, and just on and on. And shoe shine was a big bit. I know personally two men who made millions of dollars shining shoes. Well, they were busy all day long, and they had stands. The Cherry family, Cherry had a stand outside his store where he could, shine shoes in here. That's where you get the old poppin' rag, and you don't know about that anyway. Yeah, well, you don't know about shining shoes. They come already shined for you guys. But that was a business. Well, the two businesses that were in my family, one established in 1917, which was Jackson's Funeral Home. Now, a funeral home touches everybody's life. They had the big meeting room, as it were, and where they displayed caskets and you viewed bodies. Well, that room, they would roll the caskets out of there and let people have meetings there. So everybody, classes, some church groups who didn't have a church storefront had their meetings there. The Masonics had their meetings there. So it was an event center as well as. So they were involved in. Everybody knew where the funeral home was. So they knew where it was. You'd go visit the bodies like, whether you knew them or not, just want to go see who Jack's got today. My dad had a real estate company. So he had rentals as well as purchases of lands. And so a lot of people knew him, and he knew lots of people. We had lunch. He was in the 300 block of Greenwood. That was in the center of commerce. There was every barbecue person thought they had to have. We had 18 barbecue places in 1956. 18. So people think that Black Wall Street was destroyed in the massacre, but that and it didn't come back. That's not true. If you go down Greenwood right today and you look at the buildings on the west side of the street, look up at the top, and you will see a big marquee that says 1922. Then the next building, or three buildings down, it says 1923. Now you have to understand the occurrence. The event was in 1921. These were put back, resurrected buildings. So the people didn't just stop. And when I moved here in 1956, it was a bustling, everything still you could buy. We could go into other parts of town, but moving 6 blocks over to Lansing, they developed another commerce center because Greenwood was all developed. So they needed the room. My dad started an activist group called Colored Voters of America. And it was a voters registration drive, is really what it was. So I got involved in getting people to sign up to vote as a child. So it's just ingrained in me. I worked at a church where I went to church at a church that had a active political program. All of the projects, model cities and urban renewal, and they were worked through the church. Yeah. And so I was involved in it. The YWCA was a big entertainment center for the kids as well as for adults. I was in it, all along, doing things, just doing stuff. So I can't help it be a passion. It's a part of me. Well, first of all, people have to learn. If they don't, I say all the time, you have to know the past to plan the future. If you can't know that this was a mindset, This was an opportunity for people to uh, become socially and economically uh, active and, I don't want to say superior, but that's what I'm saying. They had to know that this really existed. For example, there was a company, American Beauty Products. People may know of it. They made hair grease and cosmetic products. If you don't know that that was a husband and a wife who both were highly educated, but they backed up and put that education, applied that education to making hair grease. Now, from that, they established a multi-million dollar business that employed over 80 people in the product end. They created a magazine that looked like ebony that they published every month for the beauty industry. They established a radio station, just a couple, because they had the passion and they reinvest. They didn't take their money and, well, they did buy a big house, but they didn't just buy big fancy cars for themselves. In that program, they established the way to give the Rolls Royces, and they literally gave Rolls Royces to anybody who was involved in their program who earned them. They established like a Mary Kay system, you know. That was just a couple because they were dedicated, because they were interested, and because they were, and people need to know of them. Our children need to know that that's possible. To grow up as they grew up as poor people. That all the real estate mongrels and grocery mongrels grocer mongrels that succeeded and became millionaires, real Uncle Sam paying tax millionaires, because they were dedicated. Well, our people need to understand that, and then they can build their lives. Products have changed, but the possibility of progress has not. So if there were not cameras or electronic equipment or things like that in that day, but they took what they had and made what they wanted. And so our people need to understand that. You can do it with whatever your product is. If it's something that somebody wants, my uncle used to say all the time, find a hole and fill it. Do that and do it well. And I'm definitely the past. I didn't realize what a matriarch I was. It's interesting to watch young men like you or young people like you who value the knowledge that I want to share it. I have a passion to let people know what they can do because it's been done before. It's real simple. You have to know where you're going, know where you've been to know where you're going. If you plant the seed, see, everybody's all excited, and that's the reason people look to me and come to me now, because I've been doing this for 25 years. I wouldn't stop. I developed a tour of Greenwood and North Tulsa, and people say, well, what are you doing that for? There's nothing down there. I was doing a tour when the buildings were boarded up, and the city was wanting to declare it, what do you call it, inhabitable. So as far back as that, developing the idea and not letting go of it, I had people from all over the country. From China, I had a busload of people. From New York, from Texas, from wherever. I would entertain buses to tell the story. Well, what story can you tell in front of a boarded up building other than it's dead and dying? So I created characters. I found people, local people that I knew, who would work and believe in me, and we developed costumes of people who actually, to do replications of people who actually lived in those periods of time, dating back to 1906. You can meet characters of uh, dishwashers and characters of millionaires and characters of business owners and characters of ladies of the night, club owners. You meet these characters, and these people tell you their story themselves. So that kind of a product can work in 2021 or 3031. Hopefully, you've got to know. You have to be creative to give people some kind of incentive. Now, I'm going to need actors to do that, or whoever follows me is going to need actors to do that. Need somebody to do the research to do who these people were, what kind of period clothes they wore. I'm saying if that kind of establishment is made, people will always want to know. Um, for example, Walt Disney. He had a belief in a little mouse. Totally unheard of. I mean, what a mouse. And see what's happened to that. So he had a passion, and somebody needs to, other than Princetta, there need to be people who develop passions for the story. That's Greenwood and Black Wall Street can be a destination, not just something that happens for a month or a week or whatever. And we can't let that fervor and that interest, and we can't let that die. Well, for legacy, I think that's a very strong word. I'm not so interested in having a legacy as I am in interested inspiring people to do their own thing. Uh, I can't do everything. I found that out because I've tried for, I'm 77 years old. And I have tried at least for the last 25 to 28 years of my life to spread the news. Well, now everybody's all excited about it, as people said, oh, well, this is a big deal for a week or a month or 3 or 4 days, and it's going to die. It will if people don't push it. You've got to keep pumping blood into it. A personal legacy, what's that? But a personal interest in this community. So that's all I'm saying. It's perhaps time for me to turn some stuff loose so that people can grow with it. And that's my quote contribution rather than legacy.